The night was cold, and the world was silent under a thick blanket of snow. The wind howled across the empty fields, carrying the sound of loneliness. Far from the towns where no one dared to walk in such a storm, a single man moved slowly through the white darkness. His boots sank deep into the snow, and his breath came out in heavy clouds. He was used to being alone, but even he felt the weight of silence pressing against his chest that night. As he walked, something caught his eye. At first he thought it was just the reflection of moonlight on ice, but no, the light was softer, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. He stopped, narrowing his eyes against the snow. It was strange. In this frozen land, nothing should glow. Curiosity pulled at him stronger than his fear. He stepped off the path, pushing through the snow until he reached the source of the light. There, half buried in white, lay a figure. A woman, or at least she looked like one. Her skin shimmered faintly, pale blue under the moonlight. Her face was delicate but not human. Her eyes, half open, glowed weakly before closing again. In her trembling arms, she held two tiny bundles. He bent down, brushing away the snow, and his heart froze when he saw them. Babies. They were alive, crying softly, their small voices carrying an echo that did not sound human. The man's first thought was fear. What was she? What were they? He had heard stories of strange creatures falling from the sky, of battles fought in places no human dared to go, but he had never expected to find something like this, alone, abandoned, dying in the snow. He looked around quickly. The storm raged, but the night felt too still, too watchful, as if someone else might be hiding in the darkness. The alien mother stirred weakly, her lips parting. She tried to speak, but only a faint sound escaped. Her arms tightened around her children, as if afraid he would take them away. For a moment he thought about leaving. He was just one man living a hard life. Why should he risk it? But then the newborns cried louder, their tiny voices sharp with need. Something inside him broke. He could not walk away. Easy. I'll help, he whispered, even though he doubted she understood. Gently he lifted her from the snow. She was lighter than he expected, fragile like glass, yet her body shook with exhaustion. He tucked the babies into his coat, pressing them against his chest for warmth. Their skin was strange to the touch, cool and soft, glowing faintly like their mother's. The walk back to his cabin felt endless. The snow pressed against him, the wind cut into his skin, but he did not stop. Every step was heavy, yet every cry from the babies gave him strength. He stumbled through the darkness, clutching the mother and children as if they were the most precious things in the world. At last, his small wooden cabin appeared, half buried in snow. He pushed the door open with his shoulder and stumbled inside. The warmth of the fire was gone. The hearth was cold. Quickly, he laid the woman on a rough bed of blankets and went to light the fire. Sparks caught, and soon the room glowed with a faint orange light. He turned back and saw her eyes open again. They were large, filled with a strange light, and they fixed on him with something he did not understand. Fear, hope, or maybe both. The babies stirred and whimpered, and he quickly placed them near the fire, wrapping them in cloth. Their cries softened, and their glowing skin reflected in the firelight, making the room look otherworldly. The man sat down heavily, staring at them. Who were they? Why were they here? He had questions, but no answers. All he knew was that they were alive because of him now. And something about the way the mother looked at him, desperate, pleading, made him feel as if this was no accident. It was as if fate itself had brought them to him on this night. Outside, the wind screamed, shaking the cabin walls. He leaned back, exhausted, and for a moment he thought he heard something else beyond the storm. Distant footsteps, voices, maybe even the crack of metal. His hand tightened on the edge of the chair. He told himself it was just the storm, just his tired mind playing tricks. But deep down he knew they had not been abandoned. They had been left behind, and someone or something might already be looking for them. The fire crackled, sending a warm glow across the small wooden cabin. The man sat near the flames, rubbing his hands together to bring back feeling to his frozen fingers. His eyes kept returning to the three strangers he had brought in from the storm, the alien mother lying weak on his bed, and the newborn twins wrapped tightly in cloth, glowing faintly in the firelight. The babies had stopped crying, but every soft sound they made was strange, like a whisper that echoed inside the room. Their tiny chests rose and fell quickly, and their small hands reached out as if searching for something. The man leaned closer and adjusted the blankets, trying to keep them warm. Their skin felt different, cool and soft, almost like polished stone, yet fragile like human skin. The mother opened her eyes again. She tried to sit up but fell back against the blanket with a weak gasp. He hurried to her side and lifted her gently. She was lighter than air, but her breathing was shallow, and her lips trembled with words she could not form. For a moment, her glowing eyes locked onto his, full of fear and pain. "It's all right," he said softly. "You're safe here." He doubted she understood, but the way her breathing slowed told him she at least understood his tone. He gave her a cup of warm water, holding it to her lips. She drank slowly, and a faint shimmer returned to her skin. She placed a trembling hand on his arm, her touch cold yet strangely calming. He realized she was trying to thank him, though she had no strength to speak. He sat back, his mind racing. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she lying half dead in the snow, clutching two newborns? He had heard rumors in the villages, whispers of strange lights in the skies and creatures that did not belong on Earth. But rumors were one thing. This was real. Flesh and blood, fragile and alive, right here in his cabin. The twins stirred again, their faint glow brightening. Their eyes opened for the first time, and the man's heart skipped. Their gaze was unlike anything human, silver, endless, with a depth that made him feel small. The babies did not cry now. Instead, they stared at him as if they already knew him, as if they were waiting for him. A sudden noise outside made him freeze. The wind howled, but beneath it came another sound, like a crunch of footsteps in the snow. His breath caught. He stood quickly, going to the small window. The night outside was thick with storm, but he thought he saw shadows moving between the trees. His hand went to the old hunting knife hanging by the door. He listened. Silence. Only the storm, yet unease settled deep in his chest. He turned back and saw the alien mother watching him. Her glowing eyes widened in alarm as if she too sensed the danger. She tried to speak, forcing out broken words. "They come." Her voice cracked, but the meaning was clear. His blood ran cold. Whoever had left her in the snow, whoever she was running from, they were still searching. And they might already be near. He swallowed hard and pulled the blankets tighter around the twins. "Not tonight," he muttered. "Not while you're under my roof." The alien mother's eyes softened, and for the first time a faint tear slipped down her cheek. She looked at her children, then at him, as though passing her trust into his hands. He felt the weight of it heavy on his chest. He moved quickly, checking the shutters and bolting the door. His cabin was small and simple, not meant for battles. But it was all he had. He fed more wood to the fire, filling the room with warmth, trying to keep the fear from spreading. He turned again to the bed. The mother had drifted into a restless sleep, her children curled beside her. He sat back down near the fire, staring into the flames. He knew what he should do: take them back to the nearest town, hand them over to someone with authority. Let this become someone else's problem. But the thought twisted in his gut. He had seen the way the mother held her children, the way the babies had looked at him. If he gave them up, they would not be safe. The storm outside roared louder, shaking the cabin walls. But inside, the fire burned strong, wrapping the strangers in light and warmth. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His life had always been lonely, simple, and hard. Yet now, in the middle of a storm, with a dying alien mother and her two glowing infants, he felt something he had not felt in years. Purpose. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Morning came slowly, the storm outside still raging, though softer than before. The cabin was filled with the crackle of firewood and the faint sound of the alien twins breathing. The man had barely slept. His eyes were heavy, but he kept watch through the night, listening for every sound beyond the cabin walls. When the alien mother stirred, he sat up straight. She pushed herself weakly upright, her glowing skin brighter now than it had been the night before. Her eyes searched for her children first, softening when she saw them curled together under the blankets. Only then did she look at him. "You, human," she whispered in a broken voice. Her words were heavy, strange on her tongue, but he understood. He nodded slowly, not speaking, waiting for her to continue. She struggled to form words. Sometimes she paused, searching for the right ones. "You help us. Why?" He looked at her for a long moment. Why had he? He could have left them in the snow. He could have walked away and forgotten. But the answer came to him easily. Because you were dying. Because they needed me. The mother lowered her gaze, clutching her twins. Her hands trembled. For a long moment, silence filled the cabin. Then, with great effort, she lifted her head again. They hunt us, she whispered, her voice breaking. My people divided. My children marked. They will never stop. The man's stomach turned cold. Hunt you who? She pressed her trembling hand to one of the infants. The small child stirred, glowing brighter for a moment. These twins, born under red stars. A sign, some say curse, others say gift. Leaders fear them. Warriors want them, only mother. Her voice cracked and she drew them closer to her chest. Tears slipped down her pale face. They killed many, I ran. But Storm caught me. If you had not come. She stopped, her throat closing with emotion. The man's jaw tightened. He looked at the tiny faces of the twins, peaceful in their sleep, unaware of the danger that followed them. They looked so small, so helpless, and yet if her words were true, they were the reason blood had been spilled. You mean, they're after the children? He asked quietly. Her glowing eyes locked with his. She nodded slowly. Not stop until they are taken. Are dead. A chill ran through him. He leaned back, staring into the fire. His life had always been simple. Hunt, eat, survive the winter. But now he was caught in something far bigger than himself. Aliens, wars, prophecies, things he had no place in. And yet, when he looked back at the mother and her twins, he knew one thing for certain. He could not abandon them now. He stood and paced the cabin, rubbing his temples. Then I have to keep you hidden. If they find you here. He stopped, remembering the shadows he thought he had seen the night before. His gut twisted. They might already be searching. The mother shifted uncomfortably, her voice trembling. You should not risk. Give us to them, live. The man froze. The words hit him harder than the winter wind. Give them up? He looked at her, shocked that she could even say it. Her face was full of pain, but he saw the truth. She would rather suffer herself than see him destroyed because of her. He walked to her side and crouched low so his eyes met hers. No, he said firmly. Not while I draw breath. They'll have to kill me first. Her eyes widened, glowing brighter with surprise. Then slowly tears filled them again. This time they were not only tears of sorrow. They were tears of hope. The twins stirred, their strange eyes opening once more. They looked at the man, and one of them reached out with a tiny hand brushing against his finger. A faint glow spread from the touch, pulsing like warmth. The man froze, staring. It was as if the child's touch had carried something deeper. Trust, connection, maybe even power. The mother watched in silence, her lips trembling. Finally, she whispered, They choose you. His heart skipped. Choose me? She nodded slowly. In our way, children feel spirit. They know who is safe. They bond. You are their protector now. The man sat back stunned. Protector? Him? He had never been more than a hunter, a wanderer with no family, no place. Yet here, in the firelight, with glowing children reaching for him and their mother trusting him, he felt something shift inside, something he had never felt before. But the moment of quiet was broken by a sharp sound outside, the crunch of heavy footsteps in the snow. His body tensed instantly. He grabbed his old knife and moved to the window. Dark figures were moving between the trees, their outlines blurred by snow, but their purpose clear. They were searching. They were close. He turned back to the alien mother, his voice low and urgent. They've found us. Her face went pale, her arms tightening around her children. The twins whimpered softly, sensing the danger. The man's grip tightened on the knife. He had made his choice last night, and there was no turning back now. The man's breath fogged the cold glass as he peered through the small cabin window. Shapes moved in the distance, tall and slow, shadows against the white storm. They were not men. He could tell by the way they walked, too smooth, too steady for this deep snow. His chest tightened as the truth sank in. The hunters had come. He pulled back quickly and dropped the curtain. The fire still burned, but its warm glow now felt dangerous, like a beacon calling strangers to his door. He grabbed a heavy blanket and threw it over the flames, dimming the light until only faint embers glowed. Darkness fell across the cabin, broken only by the soft glow of the alien twins. The mother stirred on the bed, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She clutched her children tightly, whispering words in a language he could not understand. The sound was soft, almost like a prayer full of pain and hope. When she looked at him, her eyes said what her words could not. They are here for us. The man moved quickly. He lifted the trapdoor in the floor, a small cellar where he usually kept food and tools. "Down," he whispered. "Aye, there." The mother hesitated. She looked at her children, then at him. He could see the battle in her mind. Fear of the dark space below, fear of being separated. But the footsteps outside grew louder, crunching closer, and she understood. She slid down carefully, holding the twins. The man lowered the door above her, closing it gently until the cabin looked empty again. He stood in the dark, gripping his old hunting knife in one hand and a heavy piece of firewood in the other. His heart pounded in his chest. He had never fought more than wolves and bears. But these were no animals. These were hunters from another world. The sound came first. A knock, slow and heavy on the wooden door. Then another, harder. The walls rattled. The man stayed silent, his breath shallow. He prayed they would pass by, but then the voice came. Deep, metallic, echoing in a way no human throat could make. "We know you are inside." The words were broken, but clear enough. Another voice followed, sharper. "Give them, live." The man's jaw clenched. His body screamed at him to give up, to surrender, to survive. But his mind flashed with the image of the alien mother's tear-filled eyes, the soft cries of the newborn twins, and the warmth of their tiny hands reaching for him. He could not. The door shook violently as something struck it. The wood cracked. Snow fell from the roof. He backed away, his knife raised. A second strike split the door wide open. The storm rushed in with blinding snow, and through it stepped 3 figures, tall, armored, their faces hidden under smooth masks that glowed faintly. In their hands they carried weapons, long, sharp, and humming with strange energy. The hunters looked around the cabin, scanning the room with slow precision. One of them pointed at the embers of the fire, then at the floor. Another moved closer, sniffing the air like a beast. Their glowing eyes behind the masks swept across the shadows, closer and closer to the trapdoor. The man's breath caught. He had to act. With a sudden cry, he swung the heavy firewood at the nearest figure. The blow landed with a crack, forcing the hunter to stumble back. The others turned sharply, their weapons buzzing to life. The man dove behind the table, gripping his knife tight. His heart hammered like a drum. The hunters moved closer, silent and deadly. One raised his weapon, but the man grabbed a burning log from the embers and hurled it. Flames scattered across the floor, filling the room with smoke and sparks. For a moment the hunters hesitated, blinded by the sudden light. The man used the chance. He lunged forward, slashing his knife across the arm of the nearest hunter. The blade sparked against metal, but cut deep enough to make the figure recoil with a hiss. The second hunter swung its weapon, narrowly missing his head and splitting the table in 2. The cabin shook with chaos. Wood splintering, fire crackling, the storm screaming through the broken door. The man fought desperately, ducking, striking, forcing them away from the cellar. Every move was clumsy compared to their skill, but he had something they did not: fearless desperation. One hunter grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground. His vision blurred as he gasped for air. But then from below the floor a soft sound rose. The cry of the twins glowing brighter in the dark. The hunters froze, their heads snapping toward the sound. That was their mistake. With the last of his strength, the man drove his knife into the hunter's arm and twisted. The grip loosened. He fell hard to the ground, coughing, and grabbed a broken piece of wood. Swinging wildly, he struck the hunter's mask. A crack split across it, and the figure staggered back, hissing in pain. The other 2 stepped forward, weapons raised, ready to finish him. But outside, a howl of the wind grew louder. No, not the wind. Something else moved in the storm. The hunters turned their heads sharply, as if sensing danger beyond the cabin. Without another word, they retreated, vanishing into the white night as suddenly as they had come. The man collapsed to his knees, shaking, blood running from a cut on his arm. The cabin was half destroyed, smoke rising from the fire, snow blowing through the broken door. He stumbled to the trapdoor and pulled it open. The alien mother looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes, clutching her glowing twins. He forced a smile through the pain. They're gone. For now. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The hunters had found them, and they would come again. The cabin was silent after the fight, except for the sound of the storm outside and the man's ragged breathing. Snow blew in through the broken door, covering the floor in a thin white sheet. The air smelled of smoke and splintered wood. His arms ached, His throat burned where the hunter had grabbed him and his knife was bent from the struggle. Yet, when he opened the trapdoor and saw the alien mother and her twins alive, warmth filled his chest. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes wet with tears. For a moment she said nothing, only studied his face as if she could not believe he had fought for her. Then slowly she climbed out, clutching her children close. The twins glowed softly against her chest, and their faint cries soon turned into small coos of relief. "You fight, for us," she whispered in her broken voice. He nodded, still catching his breath. "I told you. They'll have to kill me first," her lips trembled. She lowered her gaze, brushing her hand across one of the babies' heads. "You could leave. You stay." He looked at her, then at the twins. Tiny hands reached from the blanket, one brushing against his rough fingers. The glow that passed into his skin was warm, alive, and strange, like a heartbeat not his own. He smiled faintly. "I stay." For the first time since he had found her in the snow, she smiled. It was small, fragile, but real. The next days were quiet, but not peaceful. The storm kept howling outside, and the man worked hard to repair the damage to the cabin. He dragged wood from the shed, patched the broken door, and covered the cracks where snow blew in. His body was sore, but he did not complain. Every time he glanced at the bed and saw the mother and twins safe, strength returned to his arms. The alien mother tried to help, though she was weak. She would rise to hand him tools or whisper soothing sounds to the twins when they cried. Her words were often broken, but slowly they began to share more. He would point at objects, say their names, and she would repeat them, her strange voice learning human words little by little. "Fire," he said once, pointing at the flames. "Fi-re," she echoed softly, staring at the glow. Then she pointed at him. "Human," he chuckled. "Yes, human." He pointed at her, hesitated, then asked gently, "Name?" She placed a hand over her chest. "Lyra," she said. "Lyra," he repeated, letting the name settle in his mouth. It felt soft, like the sound of snow falling. He nodded. "I'm Daniel." She tried to say it, stumbling over the letters. "Dubnell," his smile grew. For the first time in many years he laughed, and the sound startled even him. The twins stirred, their glowing eyes opening. One giggled, a strange but sweet sound that made Daniel's heart ache in a way he could not explain. Days turned into nights, and the bond between them deepened. Lyra began to trust him more, and Daniel began to see her not as a strange creature but as a mother. Fierce, protective, gentle. She told him little of her world, but from her broken words he pieced together fragments. A war, a divided people, a prophecy about children born under a red star, and the fear that hunted her still. Yet in the quiet moments those things seemed far away. Daniel would hold one of the twins, marveling at the soft glow of their skin, the silver depth of their eyes. They would grip his finger tightly, refusing to let go. Sometimes when he closed his eyes, he felt as though the bond was deeper than flesh, as if they were sharing something wordless with him, something that touched his soul. "You, Father?" Lyra whispered once, watching him cradle one of the babies. He froze, his throat tight. "No, I'm not." He shook his head. "I'm not their father," but Lyra's gaze was steady. "Protect and love. That is father." The word struck him harder than any blade. He looked down at the small child in his arms and realized she was right. He had no family of his own, no children. But here, in this broken cabin, he had found something he never thought possible. A place to belong. Yet beneath the warmth of their growing bond, danger still lurked. At night, Daniel often woke to sounds in the distance, echoes in the storm, strange lights among the trees. He knew the hunters had not given up. They were out there watching, waiting for another chance. Still, when morning came, he kept those fears to himself. He taught Lyra more words, shared small stories of his past, and built traps around the cabin to buy them time if danger returned. One night, as the twins slept and the fire burned low, Lyra looked at him with quiet intensity. "You change." "Everything," she whispered. Daniel blinked. "Me?" She nodded slowly. "If not you, we die in snow. Children, gone. My people, never hope. But you?" She pressed her hand gently against his chest. "You change." He stared at her, unable to answer. He had always thought of himself as ordinary, a lonely man surviving one winter after another. But when she looked at him like that, he wondered if maybe fate had chosen him for something greater. Outside, the storm had finally begun to calm, The sky cleared, revealing cold stars shining over the frozen land. Daniel sat by the fire, the warmth of the twins against his arm, and felt something stir inside him. A bond had been formed, not of blood, but of choice, and in that bond, he knew he would fight to his last breath. The storm had finally ended. The world outside the cabin was silent, white, and endless. Snow covered the broken trees and the path leading away from the house. To anyone passing, it looked peaceful. But Daniel knew better. Peace was only an illusion. He rose early, his knife on his belt and an old rifle slung over his shoulder. He checked the traps he had set in the woods. Wires stretched low between trees, hidden pits covered with branches, sharpened stakes buried under snow. Crude work, but it was all he had. His breath puffed in clouds as he moved through the forest, every crunch of snow too loud in his ears. The hunters were still out there. He could feel it. When he returned, the cabin was warm with firelight. Lyra was awake, rocking one of the twins gently in her arms. The other slept in a small basket Daniel had made from old wood and cloth. Her glowing eyes lifted when he stepped inside, and for a moment he saw something he had never seen before. Calm. For just a heartbeat, she looked like a mother in her own home, safe with her children. But the moment ended quickly. She spoke softly, her broken words heavy. They had come soon, Daniel frowned. How do you know? She touched her chest, where faint light pulsed under her skin. I feel hunters close. Always close. He rubbed a hand across his face. He was tired, but she was right. The fight a few nights ago had not scared them off. It had only delayed them. They would return, stronger, and next time he might not be enough. That night, while Lyra and the twins slept, Daniel sat by the fire, staring into the flames. His thoughts twisted inside him like knives. He had a choice, and it tore at him. He could take them to the nearest town, hand them over to the authorities. Maybe soldiers, maybe scientists. Someone else would take responsibility. Maybe they would survive. But deep down he knew the truth. If he gave them up, they would be locked away, studied, or worse. The other choice was to fight. Stay hidden. Defend them against hunters from another world. But what chance did one man have against such enemies? His traps, his knife, his rifle, they were nothing against their weapons and armor. He would die, and when he did, the mother and children would be taken anyway. His fists clenched. Both choices felt like failure. The next day, the choice came closer than ever. Daniel was out chopping wood when he heard the sound, low and distant like thunder rolling through the mountains. He froze, his axe still in the air. Then he heard it again, sharper this time, like engines. His heart dropped. He ran back to the cabin. Lyra was already standing, her eyes glowing bright with fear. She held both twins close, whispering quickly in her strange tongue. They near. Too near. Daniel grabbed his rifle and paced the cabin. Then we leave, tonight, we can't stay here. Her eyes widened. Leave where? He didn't know. Towns were days away and the snow was deep. Traveling with 2 newborns and a weak mother would be nearly impossible. But staying was death. His voice was sharp, desperate. Anywhere but here. If we stay, they'll find us. Lyra shook her head slowly. You cannot run far. They always find. You must. She stopped, swallowing hard. Her voice lowered. You must leave us. The words cut deeper than any blade. Daniel stared at her, stunned. No, her eyes glistened. If you stay, you die. My children die. If you go, maybe you live. She pressed her forehead to the twins, her shoulders shaking. I not want you die for us. Daniel's chest burned with anger and sorrow. He stepped closer, his voice firm. Listen to me. I won't leave you, not now, not ever. She looked up, her face full of pain. Why? His voice cracked. Because you matter. They matter. You're not just strangers. You're family now. For a moment, silence filled the cabin. Only the fire crackled. The twins stirred in her arms, glowing faintly, their silver eyes opening to look at Daniel. One of them reached out, tiny fingers curling toward him. He stepped forward and let the child grasp his hand. A warmth spread through him, steady and unshakable. Lyra watched, her lips trembling. Finally, she nodded slowly. Then we fight. Together. That night, Daniel prepared like never before. He cleaned his rifle, sharpened his knife, and checked every trap twice. He lined the windows with heavy wood and stacked firewood into barricades. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. Lyra sat by the fire with the twins, whispering songs in her strange voice. For the first time, Daniel realized the songs were not just sounds, they carried strength. The babies glowed brighter, their cries quieted, and even Daniel felt calmer listening to her. She was weak, yes, but there was power in her that went beyond strength of body. When the night grew dark, Daniel stood at the window, staring out at the endless snow. In the distance, faint lights flickered between the trees. Not lanterns, not fire. Something unnatural, something hunting. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "So this is it. The choice is made." Behind him, Lyra whispered softly, almost like she was answering his thought. "We stand, we fight. Or we fall." Daniel tightened his grip on the rifle. His choice was clear now. He would not run. He would not surrender. He would fight no matter the cost. And as the lights in the forest grew closer, he knew the final battle was only hours away. The night was quiet, but Daniel knew it was the kind of silence that came before a storm. He stood by the broken window, rifle in his hands, eyes fixed on the trees beyond. The faint glow of strange lights moved closer through the forest, steady and unhurried. The hunters were coming. This time they would not leave without blood. Behind him, Lyra sat near the fire, holding her twins close. Her face was pale, her strength thin, but her eyes burned with fierce light. She whispered softly in her language, songs that filled the air with calm. The twins glowed brighter in her arms as if her voice gave them power. Daniel looked back at them, his chest tightening. He had lived a lonely life, always drifting, always surviving without purpose. But now he had something worth dying for. He tightened his grip on the rifle and whispered to himself, "Not tonight. Not while I breathe." The first sound came like thunder, the crack of trees breaking. Shadows moved at the edge of the woods. Then, one by one, the hunters stepped into view. Their tall bodies glowed faintly under the moon, armor gleaming, weapons humming with strange light. They moved in a line, silent and certain, like predators who knew their prey had no escape. Daniel's heart hammered. He took his position by the door, behind the barricade of wood he had built. His traps were ready. His knife gleamed by his side. He swallowed hard, forcing back fear. The hunters stopped outside the cabin. One stepped forward, voice deep and metallic. "Give them." "Last chance," Daniel shouted back, his voice raw and steady. "You'll have to kill me first." Silence. Then the door shook as something slammed into it. The wood splintered but held. A second strike cracked it open. Snow blew in, cold and sharp. Daniel raised his rifle, aimed at the shadow, and fired. The shot echoed through the night. One hunter staggered back, sparks flying as the bullet struck its armor. Not dead, but hurt. The others surged forward. The cabin filled with chaos. Blinding snow, glowing blades, the smell of fire and smoke. Daniel fought like a man possessed. He fired, swung, slashed with his knife, using every trap and trick he had prepared. A hidden pit by the wall collapsed, sending one hunter crashing down. A sharpened stake struck another, forcing it to retreat, but they were too many. One grabbed Daniel, slamming him against the wall. His rifle fell. He fought with his knife, jamming it into the gaps of the armor. Sparks flew. The hunter roared, throwing him to the floor. Pain shot through his body, but he rose again, staggering to his feet. Through the smoke, he saw Lyra. She had placed her twins in the basket and stood tall, her body glowing brighter than ever. She raised her hands, and for the first time, Daniel felt the true power within her. Light poured from her skin, filling the cabin, burning against the hunters. They staggered back, shields raised, hissing in pain. Her voice rose, no longer broken but strong, echoing like thunder. Words Daniel could not understand filled the room, shaking the very air. The twins glowed so brightly they were like stars, their tiny hands raised toward her voice. Daniel stood beside her, knife in hand, guarding her as she poured everything she had into the light. Together, human and alien stood as one. The hunters faltered. One after another they fell back, blinded by the brilliance. They hissed and roared, but the power of Lyra and her children protected by Daniel's blade was too much. With one final cry, they vanished into the storm, retreating into the forest like shadows fleeing the dawn. Silence fell. The fire flickered weakly, smoke drifting through the broken cabin. Daniel dropped to his knees, gasping for air. His arm bled, his chest burned, his whole body screamed with pain. But when he looked up, he saw Lyra still standing, her twins glowing softly in her arms. Her light dimmed, her body trembling, but her eyes were alive. "You fight," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You save." Daniel shook his head weakly. No, we saved them, together. She lowered herself beside him, tears shining in her glowing eyes. One of the twins reached out, curling a tiny hand around Daniel's finger. A warmth spread through him, deeper than blood, stronger than pain. They choose you, Lyra whispered. Now, you are one of us. Daniel felt his heart swell. For the first time in his life, he was no longer just a lonely man. He was protector, family, father. Something inside him had changed forever. Outside, the night was quiet again. The storm had passed and stars glittered across the sky. The hunters would return one day, Daniel knew that. But when they did, he would be ready. Because he was no longer alone. That night in the snow, a single human did not just save a mother and her children. He became part of their story, part of their people, part of a future greater than anything he had ever imagined. And from that night on, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same.